Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, Tarpley in Washington, D.C., and we're going through the clash between Tiny Tim Geithner, TurboTax Tim Geithner, and Wolfgang Schäuble, the much tougher, more experienced, flinty finance minister of Germany, now the dominant force in the Merkel cabinet. The meeting had been announced at short notice. Geithner flew in from China, but he went all the way across Europe to Britain first to get himself Osborne and Mervyn King, and then he worked his way back to Berlin. Right, it's an extra couple of thousand miles of flying, but you can see why he did it. Notice he doesn't go to Paris. Sarkozy is in his pocket. He doesn't have to worry about Sarkozy. Everybody assumes that Sarkozy is now the poodle of the U.S. administration. Bad day for France, right? Quelle honte. What a shame, as de Gaulle would have said. This is now what you get for being a puppet state. We'll have much more about Sarkozy later in the program, his CIA pedigree, as pointed up by Thierry Meyssan. But just now, on the eve of Geithner getting to Berlin, the Dow Jones wires carry a story. An unnamed Treasury official says the U.S. is not happy about the German ban on naked credit default swaps. This is considered, quote, damaging to the market and counterproductive, close quotes, one-sided, in quotes. Who said that? Was that Geithner himself? Was that Mark Patterson of Goldman Sachs, his chief of staff? Anyway, damaging to the market and counterproductive, not likely to be adopted on a large scale. The U.S. is arm-twisting Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, all kinds of others to make sure that they don't join. They're very much afraid of other countries joining the German ban, and they have been retrograde in doing so. But it's only the beginning. So the meeting between Geithner and Schäuble in Berlin, the idea was that they both pretend to agree. In other words, both of them, for domestic political reasons, don't want to illustrate the depth of the clash. But you can tell through the atmospherics. The Washington Post of today, 28 May, has a photograph of the two of them with Schäuble looking over at Tiny Tim, and Tiny Tim is doing his rap, and Schäuble is scowling at him. And one of the German accounts in Handelsblatt said that they sat together, but each one looked away from the other, body language signaling a great deal of tension. The Handelsblatt headline, Handelsblatt of Düsseldorf, the largest German newspaper, transatlantic conflict escalates. They say that the conflict is about some details of how do you carry out austerity policy. This is not the main thing. The main thing is precisely the actions against derivatives, because the lifeblood of the U.S. economy, of the U.S. banking system, I mean to say, and the City of London, perhaps even more so, derivatives. It is a world derivatives panic that we're in. We've got 1.5 quadrillion U.S. dollars of derivatives crushing the world. Geithner's mission, again, to save that, to prop it up, to prevent the collapse of the world derivatives bubble. It can't be done. It's a black hole. Geithner is a fanatic. He's going to try anyway, and he'll drag you into the black hole if we don't stop him from these lunatic policies. Anyway, from the press conference, Germany remains determined to act unilaterally against speculation. One of the whining, carping criticisms here in the Anglo-American financial press is, oh, Germany, you should have waited. You needed to wait for your European partners and everybody agree before you do anything. And, of course, as Schäuble points out, we needed emergency action in the middle of an emergency. And I would stress, again, from if you take a look at that article in the Wall Street Journal the previous week, it seems to me very likely that some kind of panic flight out of the euro was being put together, and it probably still is, because this is not over by a long shot. So the Germans felt that they had to save the euro from a panic run of flight panic flight capital out of the euro based on credit default swaps, because that's the main weapon of the hedge funds in this kind of a battle, along with various kinds of naked shorts. But above all, the derivatives, because there the leverage gives you the greater ability to do damage. So Germany determined to act unilaterally against speculation. Quote, "We have done our national homework on this," says Schäuble. "We know what we're doing." So the interesting thing is the U.S. press initially at least stresses agreement, because that's what Geithner says, right, that there's broad agreement. The German press stresses the clash, especially the ones that are sympathetic to the Merkel government in general. Handelsblatt, Die Welt of Hamburg, and so forth, pushing that there's actually quite a good deal of acrimony. So Geithner's line is that there's broad agreement on regulatory reform, but there's none. That's clear. Geithner is operating in a deception pattern, as usual. Duplicity is the way that he does things. You'll see that's the case with the U.S. Congress also. There was no mention by Geithner of the main issue, which is the ban on naked credit default swaps by the German government. He doesn't want to talk about that. He is asked about it, but he ducks it. He doesn't want to talk about it. Geithner also ducks the issue of the Tobin tax on financial transactions, because the German government is determined to go ahead with that. Let's see what we see in the Washington Post here today. Differences have emerged on a host of issues between the United States and Europe. The United States favors a more narrowly drawn tax levy on large firms to underwrite the recent financial crisis, while some European officials, including Schäuble, want to tax all financial transactions for a fund that might be dedicated to crisis resolution or that might go into each government's general account. The general account is the way to go, Schäuble. Forget the bailout fund or resolution fund for zombie banks. You can get rid of those just using your police agencies. But what you have to have is the Tobin tax on all financial transactions, including all derivatives, and that goes into the general fund of the governments to deal with this tremendous budget crisis that they're all facing, and everything else is getting taxed. So how can financial transactions, the financial parasites, claim to be immune to this question of a tax on them? Schäuble, says the Washington Post, defending a German approach that has become more unilateral in tone and substance, said that Germany had done its national homework before adopting a ban on certain types of stock trading known as naked short selling. The ban announced last week surprised U.S. and European officials who were expecting cooperation over such decisions. Notice the U.S. coverage tries very hard not to say derivatives. They don't want you to know that the German government has taken a significant step towards the banning regulation of derivatives in the form of credit default swaps. It's not a matter of stock trading only. It's a matter of derivatives. So they're hiding. See what they're concerned about. The hysteria of the Anglo-American press is that once you begin to talk about derivatives, the whole depression begins to become understandable. Because banks issue derivatives, not the average person. Joe Sixpack doesn't sell too many derivatives. So we'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio.